All right, so I was sitting in my boat doing some rigging, planning for an upcoming trip here, and I figured now would be a good time, since I'm digging through everything, to run through my top 5 presentations that I'm going to be using for basically the next month, what I like to call that sort of late summer, early fall period before water temperatures really start to dive as we get into the true fall patterns. So this is the time of year when fish are kind of changing, moving, and your presentation should change as well, but not too much. This is sort of that tweener time. So without further ado, I'm gonna run through those 5 presentations, and we're gonna start off with the Dropshot. Now for me, what I love about the Dropshot is the fact that it's so versatile, and you can fish it quickly, you can fish it slowly. Based on how the fish are positioning, you can put the bait right in front of them and hang it kind of right in the water column without the bait crashing down to the bottom. There's a few ways you can fish it. For me, what I like to do, just as a rule of thumb, is I like to start with plastics. I like to always have a plastic on here so that I can grab the rod. If I see some fish on side imaging or on live, I can just toss out to it and just be ready without having to dig through the crawlers and get all ready. But if I know that I have a school of fish pinned down in an area, you know, and maybe I've picked a couple fish out with plastics, I'll switch to night crawlers or leeches and get a few extra fish out of that school. So this is a really good tactic for summer, but don't be afraid to keep this tied on as we start to transition into fall, because it remains really, really effective. And for me, what I like to do, I like to run this on 6-pound test. I like to go nice, light, and finessey for the clear water lakes that I fish. On the bottom here for weight, I like to use either like a 1/4 or a 3/8 ounce weight, depending on how deep I'm fishing. The 1/4 is a little bit more, it lets the bait kind of come down a little bit more slowly instead of crashing down to them. That 3/8 gets it down in a hurry, which can be really good if you're trying to, you know, move and process through a lot of fish. But I do think that 1/4 helps getting some bites on occasion. And then I'm usually using a longer shank hook versus like the smaller octopus style live bait hooks. Why I like this longer shank hook, it's, in my opinion, a little bit better for threading plastics on there to have a nice straight plastic, but also it tends to be a little bit better for night crawlers as well. So that is my first tactic, the Dropshot. And the second tactic is gonna be some sort of glide bait like this Pigeon Puppet. So what's cool about these first two presentations is that there's a really stark contrast in how these baits fish and how you're gonna get bites from fish. So with the Dropshot, you know, that's more of a finesse tactic. You put it in front of their face and you kind of try to entice a strike out of walleyes. But with the Puppet minnow, it's the exact opposite. You drop that down there, it falls in a hurry, lands right on their head, you give them a couple rips, and you're trying to get basically a reaction strike from those fish. So that's why I like this bait, and this is also a bait that for me, like, I start to use it in summer, but it just gets better and better as you get deeper into the season in my experience. So this is a great fall tactic, good summer tactic, which makes it perfect for this time of year when the fish are sort of in that transition period. This Pigeon Puppet falls in a hurry, and one thing that's cool, I actually have been using this bait, or I was using this bait up on Rainy Lake where there's a bunch of rocks, and just beating rocks like crazy, and this bait is still in great shape. So Pigeon Puppet, it's got the big giant hook in the back, the treble on the bottom, and falls in a hurry and gets reaction strikes from fish, which is basically all you needed to do. A little bit of advice if you're using this, you don't have to use super light line for this. Basically, you know, 8-10 pound test depending on where you're fishing. Make sure, one thing that's really critical is make sure you're using a swivel. And you don't want to have the swivel too far up because you don't want to be reeling the swivel through your guides. But like basically like this far, which is what, like 3 feet, a 3-foot fluorocarbon leader with a swivel, and then I like to use braided line, just 8-pound braid. But if you are going to use braided line, just make sure your entire system is balanced. You're going to want to use a rod that's a little bit lighter, so that you don't rip the hooks right out of the fish's mouth. It's just going to help with landing percentage to have a little bit more play in that rod. So that is the second one, the next presentation, is just the good old-fashioned jig. Now, jigs are extremely effective all season long. I would say by far the most versatile presentation a walleye angler has in their arsenal. I love the tungsten jigs. So what's cool about tungsten is it's a smaller presentation with the same weight. So it falls a lot faster while being a lot smaller. What I like to do with jigs, I like to fish them a couple different ways. For one, you can put live bait on them, of course. So this time of year, it seems like just about any type of bait can be really effective. When you get into fall, people tend to discount the effectiveness of crawlers, but everything goes this time of year, and minnows just get better and better as we get deeper into the season. But another thing that I really like to do is use plastics. Now, plastics can be really effective. A 1/4 ounce with the 4-inch smelt minnow is just my absolute go-to for ripping walleyes. So a few things you can do with this. Seems like you can really find a lot of good schools of walleyes just outside the weed line. You'll find them in pods. You can use side imaging, you can use forward-facing sonar to locate them, and then throwing this in there and ripping it past their face can be a really good way to get bites, and it actually elicits reaction strikes similar to the glide baits, but it's a lot more weedless than glide baits. So that's why I like it. If you see fish that are suspended higher in the water column, you can throw it out to them, twitch it in front of their face. Another thing too, sometimes you'll find really big fish, really big walleyes that are just hanging out inside of the weeds where you can't see them on your electronics. And so basically you just gotta cover water, fishing weeds, make it as many casts as you can, and that's how you'll get a lot of reaction strikes from big fish this time of year. So jigs are a mainstay, and also I said I was gonna do 5 presentations. One of them was a jig and plastic, and the other one was a jig and crawler. So that's number 3 and number 4. The last one is just gonna be a good old-fashioned rig. So what a rig is, essentially, is you have a bullet weight right here, you have a swivel, and then you just have a teeny little octopus hook. So this one right here is a size 2, and you can put just about anything you want on a rig as far as live bait goes. So this is the time of year, as we transition into fall, rigging becomes more and more important. I do like a little bit of rigging in the summer, but as we get into fall, I'll use it a lot more often, and the more I use minnows, the more the rig comes out. And this is basically just like the ultimate finessey presentation. You can send it straight down underneath the boat and just drag it with a big long lead behind you, maybe like a 10-foot lead, and just drag it through areas where the fish live. But another alternative option is actually going with a little bit of a shorter lead on this, you know, maybe like a 4-foot lead or so, and casting it out to fish that you're seeing on your electronics. So maybe that's fish that you know are stacked up on the weed line. Maybe it's fish down at the bottom of the break at the end of a point. So for me, like what I like to do with this is I like to run a really, really light fluorocarbon leader. So this one is 6 pounds. I've definitely rigged up with 4 and 5 pound tests as well, but that for me actually does seem to be a little bit later in the season, once those fish have seen more rigs, once they've gotten beat up a little bit more. That's pretty much the run through of my top 5 presentations for this late summer, early fall period. This is what I'm gonna have tied up in my boat, ready to go as we basically move through the month of September. So right now I'm thinking about colder weather. I'm thinking about these trees going from green to orange, and I'm getting super excited for fall fishing. So thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. And if you enjoyed it and you learned something, make sure to hit that little red subscribe button down below, because we have a lot more awesome content coming in the future. And until then, we will see you in the next one.